an image that I did for Allied Moving. So this was going up in sports arenas. Like this is in Vancouver. Was put up in the Canucks arena, and this is a 60-foot by 30-foot image placed way up high. Now you need a fairly high resolution image for this, but not as high as you'd think, because the actual printing dots on something that large are about the size of golf balls. It's the same thing is true of billboards. So here's how the shot came together. Well, at the time that I did this, I had a pretty big studio. The actual shooting space had no pillars in it, and it was 50 feet long, so you get 50 feet away from your subject, and 40 feet wide. It had a 20-foot ceiling and no pillars, as I said. So it was just a wide open, wonderful space. So I could shoot up, I could shoot like full-size pickup trucks and SUVs in there. So shoot some pretty big things. And the door in, it was a bay door, but it was ground level. So you could just drive straight in, and it was a 10 by 10 foot door. This truck didn't fit in there. Because typically what I do is when lighting an automobile is we create a huge panel over top. So I have a panel that I create that is 40 feet by 20 feet wide. And you use that to light, because you need big sources to light big things, because the size of the source is relative to the size of the subject. If you're lighting an ant, for instance, a little wee flashlight like this, if it's like an inch away from it, is a huge source of illumination. But to something like this truck, it's a tiny source of illumination. So you need big things. So I thought the biggest light source I can think of is the open sky. So I took this down to an area called Spanish Banks in Vancouver. So we're shooting out towards the ocean. And I'll show you the setup. So we got down there, like I actually scouted the situation ahead of time. And we're shooting this in the summertime. And so the sun sets around, I think, 9:30, and it doesn't actually get fully dark. It's not pitch black out until about 10:30. But anyhow, so you've got a long day to work with. The thing is, we just want the very end of the day. Like we want sunset, when the sun is actually setting. So basically I take the shot, start capturing frames about 5 minutes before, and every minute or so I shoot a frame right up until 5 minutes after sunset. And the light changes dramatically, because before the sun is actually set, there is raw sunlight spilling all over everything. But relative to the light that's coming from the open sky, as you get closer and closer to actual sunset time, the sun becomes this direct sunlight becomes less and less bright as it comes down. So the ratio between the bright sunlight, direct sunlight, and the light from the open sky starts to even out as you get close to actual sun disappearing behind the horizon. The other thing for scouting it ahead of time is, you can do the math and look ahead and find out what time the sun sets. But you want to go to the location, because there could be things in the way like buildings or big hills or mountains or something that will make the actual time that the direct sun disappears, if you want to capture some of the direct sun looks. So my camera is quite far away, so it's 160 feet away. I wanted to have a compressed perspective because I'm putting the city behind it, and I want the city to loom up behind it. So if I shot the truck wide angle and then have this looming city, it wouldn't look right. Okay, so I had to make the background and the subject equal in terms of compression. So that's why the camera is so far away from this thing. Plus the fact it's a really big truck. So the truck is being lit by the open sky. So I set my exposure for that. And you notice that it's not that warm lighting, because the color balance is set for that light. Now, what I'm looking for is this open sky, is to get all of this beautiful specularity on the truck, these degraded specular highlights that you're seeing. Okay, this would be much more important if this truck were, instead of a light tone like you see here if it were black, for instance, because black you can't show shape and form with shadow. You see how this goes into shadow a bit here? On black you wouldn't notice that because the whole thing would just be black, except for wherever you have specular highlights. So to show its shape and form, you need to do it with specular highlights. Specular highlights will wrap around and show shape and form and help us to create depth on that surface. All right, so that was pretty easy. The fact that I'm doing a composite makes this possible. So I'm basically going to cut out the truck, and you'll see what happens here. I drop in a background. So I cut out the truck so I could drop in the background. The truck is still sitting on the grass foreground, but I still need to cut all that area out as well, and the trees, which was not easy. Because the final thing is I'm turning the whole thing into a blue tone, black and white, using this cold color so that the warm color of the truck separates out from it, so it really pulls forward in the image so we really see it. And then the actual image of the back of this was shot from Stanley Park in the evening, like 15 years before I did this shot. It was shot on film, actually, 35mm film, and I just scanned it and then added a Gaussian blur to it and dropped in the background and reworked some of the buildings so that they worked better in the photograph. And that's how that one came together. So we're actually controlling the environment in this case after the fact digitally. So I just went out there, and really the exposure that I was getting was for the truck. So a similar idea to the other two shots in that you're shooting out on location, but this one I was totally using available light and then manipulating things, actually our background, like losing our background, changing the color of the background and the foreground in post. So that pretty much wraps up my talk. Thank you, everybody. It was fun doing this, although it's sure weird just talking to my computer, but knowing that I've got over 600 people out there watching me right now.